Thank you so much, and I want to thank all of our viewers who are joining us today at the National Council of Resistance of Iran, U.S. Representative Office. We are going to discuss the letter that was just released days ago, sent to the Secretary of State, Michael Pompeo, by some 391 members of the U.S. House of Representatives. It's a very, very impressive list of co-signers of the letter, spearheaded by the two senior leaders in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Eliot Engel and Ranking Member Michael McCall from Texas. The reason this letter is important, I'm just going to go over it, just highlighting for the better understanding of our viewers, is that it basically says three things. First of all, it calls on the administration to do everything possible to extend the UN arms embargo on the Iranian regime, which is set to expire come October. And then it also highlights the need to basically contain the destabilizing activities of the Iranian regime in the region. And it also calls on the continuation of the ban on travel of the Iranian regime's officials, which is another item that is set to expire come October. They specifically highlight they mention the name of Ismail Qa'ani, who is the new commander of the Quds Force, following the elimination of the previous commander, Qasem Soleimani. Now, the significance of this letter is that it actually recognizes why the lifting of this arms embargo is threatening everyone. No matter what side of the aisle you are and which country, which party, this is a very real threat. They highlight the fact that the Iran regime's arms embargo must not be expired. Now, what I want to highlight is now what's really significant about that. What happens if the arms embargo is lifted come October? Well, the Iran regime President Hassan Rouhani has made it very clear that he intends to immediately take advantage of the lifting of the sanctions on the arms embargo and start purchasing new weapons. U.S. government officials have said in various reports that on top of the list for the Iran regime to purchase weapons from is none other than China and Russia. These are, the big allies of the Iran regime for years, and they certainly have weapons to offer to the Iran regime, and the Iran regime has a lot of interest in doing that. It also allows the Iran regime to sell weapons or provide weapons to other countries or proxies or groups, and the regime has enough of them. It has its own proxies in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and other places. So this time they can actually legally provide those weapons to those proxy groups that they have in the region. Now, one might say that, well, yeah, it's true on paper, but the regime is not going to do that. The regime is preoccupied with the especially now with the COVID-19 crisis. They have, to take care of the population, the crisis. Their focus right now is dealing with that. The reality is actually otherwise. Look at the facts on the ground when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis. By the way, as of today, more than 40,000 Iranians have died as a result of this pandemic. and in more than 315 cities across the country in all 31 provinces of Iran. We have prepared a report which we released a book earlier about the crisis and how the Iran regime actually has been dealing with this crisis since it started in the past 2-3 months. And we have shown that the priority of the Iran regime is really not the people of Iran and taking care of the crisis. Rather, their priority has not changed, which is funding terror, destabilizing the countries in the region, further empowering the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and their proxies. And that's why in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, the Iran regime has continued sending officials, arms, equipment, material, goods, everything to their proxies. It was in the midst of the crisis that Ali Shamkhani, the former Navy minister, one of the top commanders of Revolutionary Guards, who's now an advisor to Supreme Leader Khamenei, he's also the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of the Iran regime. He traveled to Iraq about a month ago and dealing with the meeting with the officials there, with trying to empower the status of the Shiite militias that the Iran regime controls. And don't forget that Javad Zarif made a trip just a couple of weeks ago to Syria, meeting with the Syrian dictator Assad. Now, to get a better sense, like have a better comparison of where the priority is and where the regime spends money in compared to the medical field, I'd like to invite you to watch a brief video clip, which is only a 2 minutes video clip, that shows where the priority is, and then I'll elaborate right after that. Please show the video.
Iran's regime pays IRGC Quds Force proxies 5 times more than Iranian nurses. The mullah's regime claims it is unable to provide medicine and medical facilities to the Iranian people due to US sanctions. Yet over the past 3 months, as coronavirus has spread across Iran and killed many people, the regime continues to pay its proxy militias in Syria and Lebanon in order to continue its regional terrorism and wars. The salary of IRGC militia members in Syria averages about $1,000 a month. According to health ministry officials, the average salary of nurses in Iran is $200 a month. A simple comparison. The $200 monthly salary paid to an Iranian nurse is a fifth of the $1,000 average salary of IRGC mercenaries in Syria. Another comparison. The total salary paid to all nurses in Iran is $30 million a month. The total salary of all IRGC proxy militias in Syria is $70 million a month. Conclusion. The total salary paid to the regime's proxy militias in Syria is more than double the total salary of nurses in Iran. The monthly salary of IRGC proxy militias in Syria is only a fraction of the salary of IRGC mercenaries in different countries. In addition to Syria, the regime pays fixed monthly salaries to its proxy militias in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Afghanistan. The IRGC is currently providing $700 million a year in financial assistance to the Lebanese Hezbollah. Paying salaries to proxy militias is only a portion of the cost of the IRGC's warmongering and terrorism across the globe. Regarding Syria, the mullah's funding of Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship have cost the regime up to $15 billion a year.
So, back to my point. If the arms embargo is lifted, you can see that this is a real issue. The Iran regime has been providing arms and equipment to its proxies in the region and is looking for opportunities to further empower its proxies, boost the equipment, the military equipment and the weaponry it has. But also think about it, come 3 years later, in 2023, the next level of embargo, which will be, if things go untouched, will be lifted, would be the embargo, the restrictions on the missile program of the Iran regime. If the arms embargo is lifted, that sets a precedent for the next level of the lifting of the sanctions. That's the missile program of Iran. And remember this, the Iran regime just days ago tested another missile, which is part of their ICBM program, part of their nuclear weapons program. We have put out lots of information and books and presentations. This is the book we put out 2 years ago about the missile program of the Iran regime, detailing the extent of the capabilities of the Iran regime, the infrastructure, and all of the money and resources that the regime has been spending on the missile program. And think about that now, with the lifting of these limitations, the Iran regime would be able to purchase parts, missiles, equipment, everything else that is relevant to its missile program, significantly boosting the program that they already have, which the ultimate goal is to arm their missiles with a nuclear warhead. Now, having said that, the last part of the letter is actually the lifting of the restrictions on the travel of the Iran regime's officials. And there's a long list of the Iran regime's officials in that UN resolution whose restrictions will be lifted in October. And think about it. You know, the Iran regime's officials are up to no good. Anywhere they go, whether it's in the region, their job is to empower their proxies to incite violence and wage terror operations. And also in outside of the region, in Europe, for instance, the Iran regime's officials have been caught engaging in terrorism. As we speak, in the past 2 years, 5 Iran regime's officials based in their embassies were expelled by European nations. A top regime diplomat, so-called diplomat terrorist, is now in jail in Belgium when he was caught with high explosive material intended to detonate it at the major rally of the Iranian resistance in Paris in July of 2018. And right here in the United States, 2 Iran regime's agents are now in jail after they admitted working for the Minister of Intelligence with the plan that the Minister of Intelligence had, which they said like capture and kill operations, targeting the officials of the National Council of Resistance of Iran in the United States. So if those restrictions are lifted, this web of terror of the Iran regime, which we showed in our book last year, the web of terror that extends to Europe and other places, will be actually empowered. You don't want to do that. So the question is, what's really to be done? And definitely the extension of the arms embargo on the Iran regime is a key thing. It's a more immediate task that is coming in a few months. But look at it in the big picture. That you don't want to see like restrictions after restrictions being lifted on the Iran regime, because a couple of years after that, the restrictions on the research and development of the advanced centrifuges program will be lifted. And in a matter of 10 to 15 years, all of those restrictions will be gone. And that's why it clearly shows the major flaws in the JCPOA as it was negotiated. And for that reason, as we've said repeatedly, as Mrs. Mariam Rajavi has said, that the best way to really deal with the threat of the Iran regime is to reimpose all of the 6 UN Security Council resolutions that was passed between 2006 and 2010. And all of those sanctions should be reimposed on the Iran regime. And especially this is important because This is not a regime that anyone can trust. The people of Iran have lost their trust in the Iranian regime long ago, as we witnessed in 3 rounds of major uprisings in Iran from 2018 until very recently in January of this year, right before the COVID-19 pandemic. In over 200 cities in all the provinces of Iran, people were chanting, "Death to Khamenei, death to Rouhani, death to dictatorship." They were saying the enemy is right here, meaning in Iran, and they lie when they say it's America. The people of Iran want change. This regime is unpopular, and the last thing anyone wants to do is to provide access to the Iran regime to save itself, to provide more equipment, more money, more resources, more weapons, more missiles. And the best way is to really stand on the side of the people of Iran as they are calling for change. So I want to end it right here and see if there's any questions that our audience have, and I would be more than happy to respond to them.